At my son's wedding, he tossed my gift straight into the trash. Paper memories? How pathetic, Dad. Then he handed me a $65,000 honeymoon bill. You should be grateful for the chance to show you really care. 200 guests watched my humiliation. But watching my boy's smug grin, I smiled back. Not the warm father's smile he expected, something else entirely. Time to teach him a lesson he'd never forget. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories. The microphone was making its rounds at the reception, passed from guest to guest like a sacred torch. Each speaker had glowing words for Kieran and his new wife, Vivienne. Successful young couple, bright future ahead, such a perfect match. I sat at the head table, nursing my whiskey and watching my son accept each compliment with that confident smile I'd taught him as a boy. The same smile he'd used when I taught him to close his first business deal. Uncle Robert was winding up his toast about young love conquering all when the microphone landed in my hands. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward me, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: nerves. My hands were actually trembling. When had I last felt uncertain speaking to a crowd? Well, I began, my voice catching slightly. I cleared my throat and tried again. Kieran has always been special to me, not just because he's my son, but because he's everything I hoped he'd become. I looked at him across the table. He was leaning back in his chair, that easy confidence radiating from him like heat. Vivienne whispered something in his ear, and they both chuckled. When he was 8, he told me he wanted to build an empire. I said, "Son, empires aren't built on dreams alone." He asked what else they needed. I told him, character, gratitude, and the wisdom to remember who helped you climb. A few guests nodded approvingly. Kieran's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Today, watching him start this new chapter, I see that empire taking shape. I raised my glass. To Kieran and Vivienne, may your foundation be stronger than your ambitions. The crowd erupted in applause. I set down the microphone and reached for the small wrapped box beside my plate. It wasn't expensive, just a leather-bound photo album I'd assembled over the past month. Pictures from his childhood, our fishing trips, the day he graduated law school, his first court victory. Moments that mattered. I walked over to their table, feeling lighter after my speech. "For you both," I said, placing the gift beside Kieran's champagne flute. He looked at it for a moment, then picked it up with theatrical curiosity. "What's this, Dad?" "Another one of your sentimental..." He unwrapped it, flipped through a few pages, and his face shifted to something I'd never seen before. Disgust. Pure, undiluted disgust. Paper memories? He closed the album with a snap and tossed it toward the gift table. It landed with a dull thud near the garbage bin. "How pathetic, Dad." The background chatter died like someone had cut the sound system. I could feel the room holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. I stood there for a moment, staring at my gift, lying near the trash like discarded takeout. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable, pressing against everyone in the room. I could feel Uncle Robert shifting in his seat, could hear someone's nervous cough from the back tables. "Kieran," I said quietly, my voice carrying despite its softness. "What was that?" He shrugged, that casual gesture that used to be endearing when he was 12. Now it felt like a slap. "Come on, Dad. It's all nonsense, isn't it? Old pictures, old stories." He straightened his bow tie with the confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything. "I'm at the top of my game now. Everything's perfect. Better than perfect, actually." The same boy who used to cry when he accidentally stepped on ants. He paused, glancing toward Vivienne with a look I couldn't quite read. She was already reaching into her small clutch, pulling out a folded envelope with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. Their eyes met for just a second, some silent communication passing between them that excluded everyone else in the room. Kieran took the envelope from her manicured fingers and walked back toward me, his steps measured and deliberate. The room was watching now, really watching, sensing that something was unfolding beyond normal wedding festivities. He stopped directly in front of me and held out the papers. "Actually, Dad, since we're here..." He reached for the microphone again, his voice suddenly projected across the entire reception hall. "This is the perfect opportunity for you to show how much you really care about our future." A smattering of applause rippled through the crowd. confused but polite, the kind people offer when they're not sure what's happening but feel they should react somehow. I took the envelope, my fingers recognizing the weight of official documents before I even opened it. Inside was an itemized bill. Honeymoon package, Amalfi Coast private villa, $65,000. My eyes scanned the details. Private yacht charter, personal chef, helicopter transfers, luxury accommodations for 2 weeks. The numbers felt surreal. I'd seen plenty of expensive invoices in my business life, but this was something else entirely. Kieran, I said, looking up at him. This is... I felt something strange happening to my face. I was smiling. Not the warm, proud father smile from my toast, but something else. Something that seemed to come from a place I didn't recognize. So let me understand this correctly. I gestured toward the microphone, and he handed it over without thinking. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice now carrying to every corner of the reception hall. After I paid for this wedding, I gestured around the opulent venue with its crystal chandeliers and imported flowers. After I've spent the last 27 years solving countless problems, answering endless calls for help, I now need to pay for your honeymoon too? The applause died completely. You could have heard a champagne bubble pop. This was the moment everything changed. I could feel it happening, like watching a house of cards decide to fall. Kieran's confident expression flickered. His hand shot out and grabbed the microphone from me with more force than necessary. Dad, you're embarrassing yourself, he said, his voice tight with something between anger and panic. And you're embarrassing me at my own wedding. He looked out at the crowd of stunned faces, many of them family friends who'd known him since childhood. Why don't you just leave? We can figure this out later. The words hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. Leave. My son was telling me to leave his wedding, in front of everyone we knew. I felt something settle in my chest. Not hurt, not anger, but something much more dangerous. Clarity. He actually thinks he can dismiss me, like I'm some subordinate who's gotten out of line. I looked around the room at faces I'd known for decades, business partners who'd seen me close million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, family members who'd watched me build everything Kieran had inherited access to, friends who knew exactly what I'd sacrificed to give my son every advantage. They were all watching to see what I would do next. Vivian had moved closer to Kieran, her hand resting on his arm in a gesture that looked supportive but felt possessive. She whispered something in his ear, but her eyes never left mine. There was something calculating in her gaze, something that made me realize this moment hadn't happened by accident. She's been planning this. They both have. I reached down and picked up my photo album from where it had fallen, brushed off the dust, and straightened the bent corner where it had hit the floor. The leather was scuffed now, but the memories inside were intact. You know what, son? I said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear, but without needing the microphone. You're absolutely right. We should definitely figure this out later. I tucked the album under my arm and smiled at him again, that same strange smile that didn't feel entirely like my own. Enjoy your reception. I didn't even make it to the parking lot before I had my phone out. One call, that's all it took. Marcus, it's me. I need you to revoke all of Kieran's access. Corporate accounts, cards, office, vehicles, everything. Tonight. My assistant didn't ask questions. He never did. That's why I paid him well. Consider it done, sir. Click. 27 years of open doors closed in 2 minutes. I drove home with a strange lightness in my chest, like I'd been holding my breath for months and finally exhaled. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd received 3 confirmation texts. The nets were gone. My boy was flying solo now. Let's see how high you soar without the wind beneath your wings. The next morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. I was barely through my first cup of coffee when I heard car doors slamming in my driveway. 2 of them. Through the kitchen window, I watched Kieran stride up my walkway with Vivian gliding beside him like a perfectly dressed storm cloud. I didn't bother getting up from the breakfast table. Let them knock. When they finally let themselves in, of course, Kieran still had his key. Their energy filled the room like static electricity before a lightning strike. Vivian had traded her wedding gown for designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Kieran looked like he hadn't slept. Really, Dad? Kieran's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. Really? You couldn't just let it go after embarrassing me in front of everyone? I took another sip of my coffee. Ethiopian beans, perfectly ground. Good morning to you too, son. Vivienne. I nodded toward her with perfect politeness. Coffee's fresh if you'd like some. Don't. Vivienne's voice was sharp as cut glass. Don't pretend this is a social call. She positioned herself slightly behind Kieran, close enough to whisper in his ear if needed. I recognized the formation. She was the strategist, he was the weapon. You humiliated him at his own wedding, she continued, and then you had the audacity to sabotage his finances before we even got to the hotel. Interesting. They tried to use the corporate card for the honeymoon suite. His finances? I set down my mug with deliberate care. I wasn't aware Kieran had access to my money without my permission. When did my accounts become his finances? You know what I mean, Kieran snapped, pacing now like a caged animal. The office access, the business cards, the corporate accounts, you cut me off from everything. Everything that was mine, yes. I leaned back in my chair, studying his face. But you told me yesterday you're at the top of your game. Everything's perfect, better than perfect. So surely you don't need your old man's money anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched Vivienne's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. She whispered something to Kieran, too low for me to hear, but I caught the urgency in her tone. Kieran straightened, assuming what I recognized as his courtroom posture. Here's what's going to happen, Dad. You're going to restore everything, the accounts, the access, all of it, and you're going to pay for our honeymoon like a father should. Or what? Or you'll never see your grandchildren. Ever. His voice carried the finality of a judge's gavel. Vivienne and I want kids, lots of them, but if you want to be part of their lives, you need to be part of ours, on our terms. There it was, the nuclear option, the threat every parent fears. I stood up slowly, feeling something shift inside me like tectonic plates finding their new position. Let me explain something to you, son. My voice was quieter now, but it carried a weight that made both of them take an involuntary step back. Yesterday, you didn't just ask for money. You didn't just throw away my gift. You challenged my pride in front of 200 people. You disrespected me as a man. I moved closer, and Kieran's confident posture faltered slightly. And no self-respecting man, regardless of how much he loves his son, lets that slide. For a moment, something flickered across Kieran's face. Uncertainty, maybe even recognition. He glanced between Vivienne and me, and I saw a crack in his armor. The boy I'd raised was still in there somewhere, wrestling with what he'd become. Dad, look, maybe we can, he started, his voice softer than it had been since they'd arrived. No. Vivienne's voice cut through his words like a blade through silk. She stepped forward, positioning herself between us, her perfectly manicured hand landing on Kieran's chest. Don't you dare back down now, not after what he did to us. Us. Interesting choice of words. I watched as she turned those glacier blue eyes on me, and for the first time since I'd met her, the polished facade cracked. What I saw underneath wasn't pretty. You want to play hardball, Dad? She practically spat the last word, making it sound like profanity. Fine, let's talk about what's really going to happen here. Kieran's mouth opened as if to interrupt, but she silenced him with a look that could have frozen fire. You're going to restore every single thing you took away, she continued, her voice rising with each word. The accounts, the access, the office, all of it. And you're going to pay for our honeymoon with a smile on your face and an apology for your pathetic little tantrum. There she is, the real Vivienne. I could feel the temperature in the room shifting, like watching a beautiful mask melt away to reveal something feral underneath. Because if you don't, she stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with something else. Desperation, maybe, or pure calculated ambition. I will make your life a living hell. I will turn every person in this city against you. I will make sure everyone knows what a vindictive, petty old man you really are. Kieran was staring at her like he'd never seen her before, which I realized he probably hadn't. Vivienne, that's enough. He tried again. Is it? She whirled on him, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Is it enough, Kieran? Because right now your father is disrespecting me, disrespecting us, disrespecting our marriage. Are you going to let him get away with that? She's good. I'll give her that. She's very good. I watched her work, watched her rebuild Kieran's anger brick by brick, watched her turn his moment of doubt into renewed fury. It was like watching a master craftsman at work, if the craft was manipulation. "You will not speak to my wife that way," Kieran said, and just like that, the moment of connection between us evaporated. He was back under her spell, dancing to her tune. I'd seen enough. "Your wife," I said, my voice calm as still water. "Kieran, your wife isn't speaking to me. Your wife is giving you orders. Your wife is making demands in my house, using my son as her mouthpiece." The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Vivian's eyes narrowed to slits. "How dare you? How dare I what? Point out that she's the one making all the decisions here." I looked directly at Kieran, ignoring her completely. "Tell me, son, when exactly did you hand over your backbone to your wife? When did she become the one who decides what happens in your marriage, your family, your life?" The puppet master doesn't like it when someone points at the strings. "I make my own decisions," Kieran said, but his voice lacked conviction. Even he didn't believe it. "Do you?" I asked quietly. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like Vivienne decided you needed my money. Vivienne decided how to get it. Vivienne decided to humiliate me at your wedding, and Vivienne decided to come here today to threaten me." I could see the doubt creeping back into his eyes, see him starting to question what he was seeing, what he was doing. "So tell me, Kieran, and I want you to answer, not her. What do you want from me? Not what she wants. What do you want?" The silence stretched between us like a tight rope. Vivian's face had gone from beautiful to something almost predatory, her mask completely gone now. She was watching Kieran with the intensity of a snake watching a mouse, waiting to see which way he'd run. This is the moment. This is where I find out if my son is still in there or if I've lost him completely to her. "I want," Kieran started, then stopped. He looked at Vivian, then at me, then back at her again. "You want what she tells you to want," I said softly. "And that, son, is the most pathetic thing I've ever seen. I raised you to be a man who makes his own choices. Apparently, I failed." The words hit him like a physical blow. I could see it in the way his shoulders sagged, in the way his confident mask finally slipped completely away. But Vivienne looked ready for war. 3 days. That's how long it took for Vivienne to show me what real warfare looked like. The first call came Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports. My assistant Marcus transferred it through with obvious reluctance. "Hello, Dad." Her voice dripped with honeyed venom, each syllable carefully crafted to wound. "I hope you're having a lovely morning. I certainly am." I set down my pen and leaned back in my chair, feeling the familiar leather creak beneath me. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten like a fist. "Vivian, what can I do for you?" "Oh, you've already done so much." That laugh, like crystal breaking in slow motion. "Did you know your business partner Harold Jenkins is such a lovely man? We had coffee yesterday at that charming little cafe on 5th Street. I told him all about your episode at the wedding, how deeply concerned Kieran and I are about your recent behavior." The little manipulator. She's playing chess while I was playing checkers. My fingers tightened around the phone. "I'm sure Harold appreciated your concern," I said carefully, keeping my voice level despite the rage building in my chest. "He did. He was absolutely fascinated by the whole story, especially the part about how you've been making such irrational financial decisions lately. Cutting off your own son at his wedding in front of 200 people." Her voice took on a mock concerned tone that made my skin crawl. "Poor Harold is starting to wonder if you're really fit to handle such important business relationships. I mean, if you can't even manage your own family." The ice in my veins wasn't from fear. It was from recognition. She was systematically poisoning every professional relationship I'd built over 30 years, and she was enjoying every second of it. "You know what the beautiful thing is?" she continued, and I could practically hear her smiling through the phone, savoring each word like fine wine. "People want to believe the worst about successful men. They're so eager to hear about titans falling apart. It makes them feel better about their own pathetic failures." She's not just attacking my business. She's attacking my reputation, my credibility, everything I've built from nothing. I stood up and walked to the window, watching traffic crawl through the city below. "What do you want, Vivienne?" The same thing I wanted 3 days ago, Steve. The way she said my name made it sound like an insult. Full restoration of Kieran's access to everything. Payment for our honeymoon. And let's make it the deluxe package now, shall we? And a very public apology for your behavior at our wedding. Her voice turned sharp as a scalpel. Oh, and from now on, all major family financial decisions go through me, since you clearly can't be trusted to make rational choices anymore. The audacity of it took my breath away. I actually laughed, a short, bitter sound. And if I refuse, then tomorrow I'm having lunch with the Morrison account. You know, the one that represents 40% of your quarterly revenue? Her tone was conversational now, discussing my destruction like the weather. Thursday, I'm playing tennis with Sandra Wellington. Her husband controls half the city council contracts. Friday, I have a spa appointment with Margaret Chen from the bank consortium. She's mapped out my entire professional network like a general planning a siege. By next week, everyone who matters in this city will know that Steve Thornton is a bitter old man who's lost his edge, who can't even maintain relationships with his own family, who makes erratic business decisions based on petty personal grudges. She paused, letting the words sink in. Imagine what that does to investor confidence, to client trust, to your precious reputation. You're threatening to destroy my life's work over a honeymoon bill? I'm threatening to reveal what you really are, a selfish, controlling old fool who puts his pride before his family. The beauty is, I won't have to lie about anything. I'll just emphasize certain truths. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me standing there with a dead phone and the taste of copper in my mouth. She's not just threatening me, she's declaring total war. Wednesday brought another call. This time she'd accidentally run into my biggest client at the country club. Such a lovely conversation we had about family values and business ethics, she purred. Thursday, she'd somehow managed a run-in with the president of the Chamber of Commerce at his daughter's school event. Funny how these chance encounters just keep happening, she said with that razor blade laugh. Each call was a status report delivered with the satisfaction of a cat presenting a freshly killed mouse to its owner. She was dismantling my world piece by piece, and she wanted me to watch every moment of it. By Friday, I was questioning whether I'd underestimated her completely, or whether I'd simply forgotten how ruthless ambition could be when it wore a beautiful face and spoke with a cultured voice. That's when Uncle Robert called. Steve, we need to talk. My uncle's voice carried the weight of 78 years and the authority of someone who'd survived every family crisis since the Kennedy administration. This whole situation with Kieran and that wife of his, it's gotten completely out of hand. I was pacing my office like a caged animal, watching the city below through floor-to-ceiling windows. What have you heard? Enough. Word travels fast in our circles, especially when someone's spreading poison with the efficiency of a professional. Uncle Robert's tone was grim, loaded with implications. She's been busy, hasn't she? Making the rounds, telling her version of events to anyone who will listen. Of course he knows. Uncle Robert hears everything that matters in this city. She's trying to destroy me professionally, I said, the words tasting like ash. Turn my own relationships against me, make me look unstable, unreliable. She's trying. Whether she succeeds depends entirely on what we do next. Uncle Robert paused, and I could hear him thinking, weighing options the way he'd done in boardrooms for 40 years. I want you to call them. Kieran and his wife. Invite them to dinner somewhere very public. The Meridian Club tomorrow night. Tell them you want to discuss a reasonable resolution to this whole mess. Uncle Robert, I'm not backing down from this. Who said anything about backing down? His voice carried something I hadn't heard in years, a dangerous edge that reminded me why people feared Robert Wellington as much as they respected him. I'll be there too. It's time to put some cards on the table that might change everyone's perspective on this situation. The way he said it made my pulse quicken. There was something in his tone, something that spoke of hidden knowledge and carefully planned moves. What cards? The kind that should have been played days ago. The kind that explained why a woman with Vivienne's particular background was so interested in marrying into our family. Uncle Robert's pause was loaded with meaning, heavy with secrets. Trust me on this one, Steve. Make the call. Background. What the hell does that mean? I found myself staring at my reflection in the window, seeing not just my own face, but the shadow of something larger moving behind this whole conflict. Uncle Robert, what aren't you telling me? Nothing over the phone. Too many ears these days, too many ways for conversations to travel. His voice softened slightly, taking on the protective tone I remembered from childhood. Just make the call. Tell them you want to find a way forward that works for everyone. Tell them you're willing to listen to their concerns and discuss a reasonable compromise. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. And tell them Uncle Robert will be joining us for moral support. After I hung up, I sat in my office for 20 minutes, staring at my phone like it might reveal its secrets if I looked hard enough. The weight of the last few days pressed down on me, the public humiliation, the systematic attacks on my reputation, the growing realization that I'd been playing a game I didn't fully understand. What does Uncle Robert know that I don't? What cards has he been holding all this time? When I finally dialed Kieran's number, my hands were perfectly steady. Whatever was coming, whatever secrets Uncle Robert planned to reveal, I was ready for it. The phone rang twice before Kieran picked up. "Dad?" His voice was cautious, uncertain, nothing like the confident man who'd humiliated me at his wedding. "Son, I think it's time we all sat down and talked." The Meridian Club hadn't changed in 30 years. Same mahogany paneling, same crystal chandeliers casting warm light over white tablecloths, same hushed conversations of the city's elite conducting business over prime rib and aged whiskey. I arrived 15 minutes early, claiming our usual corner table with a view of the city lights twinkling below. Familiar territory. Good. I need every advantage I can get. Kieran and Vivian walked in exactly on time, and I watched them scan the dining room with the confidence of people who'd never been refused anything. Vivian looked stunning as always. Black cocktail dress, pearls, her blonde hair swept up in a perfect chignon. The picture of refined elegance. Such a beautiful mask. I wonder what's underneath it. They spotted me and approached, Kieran's face cautious but hopeful, Vivian's expression unreadable. But when they reached the table and saw Uncle Robert rising to greet them, both stopped short. "Uncle Robert?" Kieran's voice carried surprise and something else. Unease, perhaps. "I didn't know you were joining us." "Steve thought it would be good to have a neutral party present," Uncle Robert said smoothly, extending his hand to Vivian. "Mrs. Thornton, you look lovely this evening." Vivian shook his hand with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Wellington, what a surprise. She knows something's wrong. Good. Let her wonder." We ordered drinks, whiskey for the men, wine for Vivienne, and made small talk about the weather, the restaurant, anything but the elephant in the room. I watched Vivienne carefully, noting how her fingers drummed against the table, how her eyes kept darting between Uncle Robert and me. Finally, after our appetizers arrived, Uncle Robert set down his fork and looked directly at Vivienne. "So, my dear, tell us about yourself, your family, your background. I'm embarrassed to say I know so little about the woman who married our Kieran." Vivian's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "There's not much to tell, really. I grew up in Connecticut, went to school abroad, worked in finance before meeting Kieran." Connecticut. Lovely state. Uncle Robert's voice was conversational, but I caught the steel underneath. "What part? I have friends all over Connecticut." "Greenwich," she said quickly. "My father was in investments, past tense. Interesting." "Ah, Greenwich? Beautiful area, expensive area," Uncle Robert smiled. "Your father must have done very well for himself to afford a house there." Something flickered across Vivian's face, too fast for Kieran to catch, but I saw it. Fear. "He did well enough," she said, reaching for her wine glass with a hand that trembled slightly. Uncle Robert nodded thoughtfully. "I'm sure he did, at least until the federal investigation into his Ponzi scheme. That must have been difficult for the family." There it is. The silence that followed was deafening. Kieran's fork clattered against his plate. Vivian went perfectly still, like a deer caught in headlights. "I'm sorry, what?" Kieran's voice was barely above a whisper. "Your wife's father, Charles Morrison, ran a sophisticated investment fraud for nearly a decade," Uncle Robert continued calmly, as if discussing the weather. "Lost approximately $200 million of other people's money before the SEC caught up with him. The family lost everything: house, cars, jewelry, savings. Everything. That's not, Vivienne started, but Uncle Robert held up a hand. There's more, I'm afraid. After her father's conviction, Vivienne tried to maintain her lifestyle through creative means. 3 previous engagements to wealthy men, each one ending when her financial situation was discovered. The last one, a banking heir in Boston, actually filed charges for theft before dropping them when she agreed to leave the state. My God, she's a professional. Kieran was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. Vivienne, tell me this isn't true. Tell me he's lying. Her mask was slipping now, beautiful features hardening into something cold and calculating. Your uncle is a pathetic old man who can't stand to see you happy. This is all lies, fabrication. Is it? Uncle Robert pulled out his phone and scrolled through something. Because I have the court documents right here. Public record, really. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look. You went behind my back to investigate my wife? Kieran's voice was rising, drawing glances from nearby tables. I investigated a woman who appeared out of nowhere and within 6 months was demanding access to our family's money, Uncle Robert replied evenly. A woman whose background didn't add up, whose stories kept changing. He's been watching her from the beginning, all this time while I was being played. Vivienne's composure finally cracked. You want to talk about pathetic? Look at your precious Steve, running to his uncle like a little boy who got his feelings hurt, too weak to fight his own battles. Weak? I spoke for the first time since the revelations began, my voice quiet but carrying across the table. You call it weak to protect what I've built? To refuse to be extorted by a con artist? Extorted? She laughed, but it was harsh now, nothing like the musical sound I'd heard before. You should be grateful someone finally taught your spoiled son how to ask for what he deserves. What he deserves, I repeated slowly. Not what you deserve. What he deserves. That's when I saw him. Walking across the dining room with the measured pace of someone who belonged here was a man in his 50s, impeccably dressed, with the bearing of old money. He was heading directly for our table, and the look on Vivienne's face told me everything I needed to know. She knows him, and she's terrified. Vivienne Morrison, the man said as he reached our table, his voice carrying the crisp accent of old Boston families. Or should I say Vivienne Caldwell? Or was it Vivienne St. James? You've used so many names, I can hardly keep track. Vivienne had gone white as marble. Charles, what are you doing here? Having dinner. Imagine my surprise when I spotted you across the room. Charles Pemberton, I recognized him now from the business pages, turned to address our table. Gentlemen, I hope you'll forgive the interruption, but I felt I should warn you. This woman stole $50,000 from my family before disappearing in the middle of the night. We chose not to prosecute only to spare my son the embarrassment of having been so thoroughly deceived. The net is closing. Kieran stood up so abruptly his chair nearly toppled backward. $50,000. His voice was raw with shock and growing fury. It was a misunderstanding, Vivienne started. Was our marriage a misunderstanding too? Kieran's hands were shaking. Was everything you told me about your family, your background, your feelings for me, was all of it a lie? Kieran, please, if you would just listen. Listen to what? More lies? He turned to face her fully, and I saw something break in his expression. How much of it was real, Vivienne? Any of it? She stood to match him, her composure completely shattered now. You want the truth? Fine. The truth is your family has more money than they know what to do with. And yes, I thought you could share some of it. The truth is I saw an opportunity and I took it, but that doesn't mean... Get out. Kieran's voice was barely recognizable, thick with rage and betrayal. Get out of this restaurant. Get out of my house. Get out of my life. You can't just... I can do whatever I want. You're not who you said you were. Our entire relationship is built on lies. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling my lawyer in the morning. This marriage is over. Vivienne looked around the table, at Kieran's fury, at Uncle Robert's satisfied expression, at Charles Pemberton's cold disdain, and finally at me. For a moment, I saw not the calculating predator, but something smaller, desperate. Then the mask snapped back into place. You'll regret this, she said, grabbing her purse, all of you. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor with each measured step. Even in defeat, she moved like royalty. And just like that, it's over. The silence that followed was broken only by the quiet murmur of other diners and the soft clink of silverware against china. Charles Pemberton excused himself with quiet dignity. Uncle Robert signaled for another round of drinks, and Kieran slowly sank back into his chair. "Dad," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry." I reached across the table and put my hand on his shoulder, feeling the tremor running through him. "I know, son. I know." The restaurant had nearly emptied by the time Uncle Robert excused himself, leaving Kieran and me alone at the table with the wreckage of our family dinner. My son sat slumped in his chair, staring at his untouched dessert like it might hold answers to questions he was afraid to ask. "She pushed me into it," he said finally, his voice hollow. "The whole honeymoon thing. She kept saying we needed to establish ourselves as a power couple, that successful people don't pay for their own vacations, that you would respect me more if I acted like I deserved your support instead of begging for it. Still making excuses, still not taking responsibility. She said a lot of things, didn't she?" I replied, swirling the whiskey in my glass. "But she didn't hold a gun to your head at that reception." "Dad, you don't understand. She was very convincing. She made it sound like I was being weak by not asking for what was rightfully mine." His voice carried a pleading note, like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. "Rightfully yours?" I set down my glass and looked at him directly. "When did my money become rightfully yours? When did my support become an obligation instead of a choice?" "That's not what I meant, isn't it?" I kept my voice gentle, but firm. "Kieran, you always had a choice. Every moment of that wedding, every word you spoke, every decision you made, you chose it. Vivian may have planted the ideas, but you watered them." He needs to hear this. He needs to understand what really happened. Kieran's hands clenched into fists on the white tablecloth. "I was trying to be strong. She said you'd taught me to be weak, always coming to you for help instead of demanding what I'd earned." "What had you earned, son?" The question hung in the air between us like smoke. I watched him struggle with it, watched him try to find an answer that didn't exist. I worked hard. I built my practice. With connections I provided, I made good grades in school that I paid for. I've been a good son. Until you threw my gift in the trash and humiliated me in front of 200 people. Each truth hits him like a physical blow. Good. He needs to feel this. His composure finally cracked completely. "You're right. God, you're right about all of it. I was ungrateful. I was entitled. I let her manipulate me into thinking I deserved something I hadn't earned." Tears started rolling down his cheeks. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry for everything. For the wedding, for the things I said, for not seeing what she was doing to me, to us." I felt my own chest tighten, watching my son break down. Every paternal instinct screamed at me to comfort him, to tell him it was all forgiven, to restore everything and pretend it never happened. But that's exactly what got us here in the first place. "I know you are," I said quietly, "and I forgive you." Relief flooded his face like sunrise after a long night. "So we can put this behind us? Go back to how things were?" "No," I said, the single word falling like a stone into still water. "We can't." His face fell. "What do you mean?" "The accounts stay closed, Kieran. The access stays revoked. The safety nets stay down." I reached across and put my hand over his. "Forgiveness doesn't erase consequences, and consequences don't disappear just because you're sorry. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do, but it's also the most important. But Dad, you want to rebuild our relationship? You want to earn back my trust? Then earn it. Build something that's truly yours. Show me the man I raised, not the boy Vivian corrupted." I stood up and placed my napkin on the table. "When you can look me in the eye and say you've built a life without my money, without my connections, without my safety net, then we'll talk about what comes next." Kieran sat there staring up at me, understanding finally dawning in his eyes. Not just forgiveness, but accountability. Not just love, but respect. "I love you, son. That will never change. But love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's enabling." I walked away, leaving him alone with the hardest lesson I'd ever had to teach him. Some gifts can only be earned, and some lessons can only be learned the hard way. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. And as always, thank you for watching.